Hello, welcome back. Thank you for coming back, or if you're a first time viewer, thank you for clicking on the video. This video, if you've watched my previous one, is going to be a different type of video. This is also going to be a multi-part video as well because I'll link the photo of the iceberg in the description, but it's a very long iceberg and each depth of the iceberg has a lot of entries in it. And I mean, it wouldn't take long if I was doing this full time, but unfortunately, I'm not. So it's going to be a while before I get through. But you know what? I'm going to have some fun with it. Enjoy the ride while it lasts, at least for this iceberg. And let's get into it. A little disclaimer, this is my first time doing anything like this. Obviously, once I keep doing this, I'll get into the swing of things. But for right now, probably going to make some mistakes, probably mispronounce something, the usual thing. So, like I said, disclaimer. So, starting off with the first entry, Johnny David Gosch. Johnny Gosch was born on November 12th, 1969 in Des Moines, Iowa, and was a paperboy at the time, along with a few other dozen boys. On September 5th, 1982, Sunday morning, Johnny woke up early in the morning to get ready for his paper route. He usually woke up his father to help him with the route, but decided not this time. Instead, in his place, he took his dachshund, Gretchen. When Johnny was getting ready and picking up his papers for his route, he was seen talking to a man in a blue, two-toned car. A fellow paperboy, Mike, had noticed that another man was following Johnny as he was making his way to his route starting point. An unnamed witness then heard what could have been a car door slam shut and saw a silver Ford Fairmont speed away, interestingly from where Johnny's wagon was left. And at this point, this was the last time he was seen by his parents and any witnesses at the time. A witness, John Rossi, who had also interacted with the man in the blue car, had said that something felt off. Johnny told John that the man was asking for directions. John Rossi, when giving a statement to the police, tried to remember the license plate number, but he couldn't. Interesting to note that John had undergone hypnosis to remember the numbers on the plate and gave some numbers that were from the Warren County. Whether or not that was correct will remain a mystery. Following the initial disappearance, Johnny's parents, John and Noreen Gosch, received phone calls from customers along the paper route. I find it a little strange that the customers would have a paperboy's parents' number. You'd think they would call the post office or something to let them know that their paper wasn't there. Anyway, Johnny's father, John, began searching for him around the time of 6 in the morning. He didn't find him, but he found his wagon, which was only 2 blocks from their home. Contacting the police after finding his wagon, the police didn't arrive until about 45 minutes later. They initially stated that he might have run away, but later changed it to him being possibly kidnapped. They recovered little evidence and no viable suspects. Now, this is possibly the last time Johnny was seen, but what gets interesting is the events that happened afterwards. Noreen Gosch had stated that her son was seen in Oklahoma when a boy was seen yelling to a woman for help as he was being dragged off by 2 men. I honestly have no idea how this was relayed to Noreen if she was in Iowa. I mean, I've searched the internet for answers to how she knew this. I can't really find how she knew this. Maybe there's something I didn't see. If you could find something, maybe just leave it in the comment below. But yeah, it's a mystery to me for right now. And another interesting tidbit is that Johnny was among the first missing children to be put on the side of milk cartons through the effort of his parents. That's where that whole missing child on the side of a milk carton came from too. It's been in a lot of cartoons, shows, a little before my time. I didn't grow up with any of it, so I haven't seen it actually in person, but I know we've all seen it in other types of media. So moving on, we're going to start treading in speculation now, as these statements were never proven to be accurate and don't provide any substantial evidence for the case. From around the time he was kidnapped to around 2006, there were incidents that included phone calls claiming to be their son, letters sent claiming that their son was brought to Mexico City and to send money to have their son returned, which later turned out to be fraudulent. Johnny himself turning up at his parents' house in 1997, which he would be around 27, and talking to his mother, explaining to her that he has to remain in hiding because he's still in danger, and finally having photos of 3 children on her doorstep. The photos had depicted the children bound and gagged. Noreen claimed that one of the boys was Johnny, though that was never confirmed. Something positive that at least came out of this was the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which Johnny's mother helped create. Madeline MaCann. Madeline Beth MaCann was a 4-year-old British child when she disappeared on May 3rd, 2007. She was vacationing with her parents, Kate and Gary MaCann, in Praia da Luz, Portugal. She was there with her parents, her 2 twin siblings, and a group of family friends. They had spent a total of 6 days in a holiday apartment at a resort until May 3rd. In the morning of the disappearance, during a family breakfast, Madeline had asked her parents why they had not come into the room when she and her brother were crying. After she had disappeared, her parents had taken this to mean someone could have possibly entered the room without them knowing, which could make someone extremely frustrated knowing that they could have prevented something terrible like a kidnapping. The rest of that day, the family and the friends spent it like any other family would on vacation, and at this time, this was the last time Madeline was photographed. At 8:30 p.m., the parents were dining with friends at the Oceans Club restaurant, which was only about 180 to 295 feet depending on how you walked it. Being a close distance meant that the parents could actually see the parts of the windows to their apartment. As the parents were dining, Madeline, along with her siblings, were sleeping in their room. The parents were checking in on their kids about every 30 minutes. Gary was the first to check on the kids at around 9:05 p.m., and as he came into the apartment, he noticed that the kid's bedroom door was wide open. He said that he remembers leaving it just barely shut. He thought it was odd, but continued on nonetheless and pulled it back, almost closed again. As Gary was making his way back to the restaurant, a friend that had accompanied the family, Jane Tanner, was also on her way to check on her own daughter. Jane Tanner should have passed by Gary as they were using the same narrow road, but Gary never recalled seeing her when he was returning. But Jane stated anyway that around 9:15 she had noticed a man carrying a small child. And now from here it begins to get a little he said, she said. Jane said she saw a man, which later turned out to be not even what she thought it was. That is, that it was just some guy who was carrying his own daughter to their apartment room. It was then stated by a different witness that another man similar to the one Jane had described was seen uncomfortably carrying a child even further away from the holiday apartments. So essentially, Jane thought she saw a man taking a random child away, but it was just another man taking his own daughter, which fit the description of the other man that another witness saw what Jane thought she saw. I hope I worded that in a not confusing way, but that's how I interpreted how it should have been stated in the article that I was reading. Anyway, the MaCanns themselves were also considered suspects by the Portuguese police at one point. The police had thought that the kidnapping could be some kind of cover-up for Madeline's disappearance, but that was investigated thoroughly, and it was found out that obviously they didn't have anything to do with it since they had plenty of witnesses around the time that it happened. So, that got thrown out. There's quite a bit that I didn't go over for this one in particular because this would probably take up a good chunk of time to explain. There's a lot of evidence in this case that doesn't really point anywhere concrete, but the one thing that I find interesting to this case in particular is that it has ties to Timmothy Pitzen. Timmothy Pitzen was a 6-year-old child from Aurora, Illinois who went missing on May 11th, 2011. I think this is one of those situations, especially for a parent, that would completely catch you off guard. You see, Timothy's father, James Pitzen, woke up that day like any other day. He got ready for the day, most likely had breakfast with his son, and took off for the day. They arrived at Greenman Elementary School, and James said goodbye to his son, unknowingly for the last time. Now James set off to do his own thing as usual, but his wife and mother of Timothy, Amy Fry Pitzen, came to the school and checked him out between 8:10 and 8:15 a.m. for a family emergency. Come to find out that the emergency was non-existent. From there, the two spent the next 2 days moving from resorts to even visiting the Brookfield Zoo. All of these locations had witnesses confirming that they had been through there, or at least had security camera footage spotting them. On May 12th, the two could be seen together on security footage for the last time. May 13th, Amy had phoned family members, her mother, brother-in-law, and a few others, explaining that she and Timothy were okay. Timothy could actually be heard in the background telling Amy that he was hungry. This would be the last time anyone would hear Timothy. Later on that day, Amy was seen on security cameras alone in a Family Dollar store in Winnebago, Illinois. She had bought pen, paper, and envelopes and proceeded to check into the Rockford Inn in Rockford, Illinois. In a note she would write, it said that Timothy was safe, with people that would look after him, but he would never be found. The next day, Amy's body was found as she had taken her own life. Police investigation would not turn up any substantial evidence concerning the whereabouts of Timothy. There were a few small leads, like blood being found in the car that Amy was using with Timothy, but James said that it was probably from a nosebleed that Timothy had a month ago. In 2019, there was also a person claiming to be Timothy. Someone had called police to report a teenager wandering the streets, and when approached, claimed to be Timothy. The man was later identified as Brian Michael Reaney, who was obviously not Timothy. And like the many entries into this list, Timothy is still missing to this day. No new evidence, leads, anything that could point to where he is or who has him has come to light. Amy Lynn Bradley. Amy Lynn Bradley was an American woman who went missing on March 24th, 1998 on a Caribbean cruise ship, Rhapsody of the Seas. Amy and her family, which consisted of her parents Ron and Eva, however you want to say that, and her brother Ron Bradley. They were vacationing on the cruise ship, which they had boarded on the 21st, and did the usual thing you can do on said cruise ship for a few days. Then on the 24th, the events that led to her disappearance played out, or lack of, I should say. Amy and her brother decided to dance into the early hours of the morning. Amy had hung out and drank with the ship's band member, Alistair Douglas. This was a confirmed fact, as a videographer caught the moment on film as well as them dancing together. Alistair had claimed that he left for the night at around 1 a.m. At around 3:35 a.m., Amy and Brad came back to the family's cabin. Brad stated that he and Amy had stayed up a little while longer talking on the cabin's balcony. Brad had fallen asleep while Amy stayed up for a bit. From here, no one really knows what happened or has any solid evidence of what could have led to her disappearing. Ron would wake up later at around 5:30 a.m. to see that she was still out on the balcony. He would immediately go back to sleep. But at 6 a.m., he would wake back up to see that she was gone without any indication of where she went. Amy's family quickly notified the ship's crew and wanted them to make a shipwide announcement. But the ship's crew informed that they would rather make the announcement later at around 7:50 a.m., when most of the passengers would leave. This decision by the crew has been criticized as being a detrimental move that may have greatly lowered the chances of finding Amy. Ultimately, the search that ensued after the initial one turned up nothing. It's always amazed and scared me how easy it was for someone to vanish with virtually no trace. Amy was on a cruise ship that was in open water, so realistically she only had the ship to be on. That is, unless she ended up in the water, which some authorities believe to have happened, though the search in the water turned up nothing. Amy's father had told authorities that she was an excellent swimmer, though honestly I would say that swimming in an ocean could be different than just swimming in a controlled environment. I wouldn't know about that though, because I can't swim, so take my word for what it is. Many of the staff were seen as suspicious. The band member from earlier, Alistair, told one thing to the authorities, while the CCTV said something different. Though this difference from his story and the CCTV were nothing more than a case of probably not remembering what he did exactly, as it was nothing that was detrimental to his alibi. There was also a waiter that was suspected because he was constantly approaching the family asking for them to pass a note to Amy. This note had asked if she would like to go drinking with him when they would hit shore. Of the many minor suspects, ultimately nothing came from them. Thus begins the possible sightings. One possible theory is that she could have been sold to a human trafficker. This is supported by the fact that many people claim to have seen a woman that fit her description. The woman in question, depending on who saw her, would have either one or up to 3 men in her company, and these men appeared to have a threatening demeanor. Another one was from a sailor with the U.S. Navy, and he claims that he had encountered a woman who had asked for his help. She identified herself as Amy and said she was from Virginia. The sailor would not inform anyone of this as he feared for his career and only told her parents after he retired, though there wasn't any evidence to support his claim. This was the best theory that could be thought of, as another incident in which a photo sent to Amy's parents through email showed what looked like a woman that resembled Amy in a sexually provocative position. Like many in this iceberg, there wasn't any evidence that could potentially gain better insight into what happened. She was legally declared dead on March 24th, 2010. 12 years of silence, though there are still rewards from the FBI and her parents for any information regarding her or anyone involved. Natalee Holloway. Natalee Holloway was an 18-year-old American who went missing in Aruba on May 30th, 2005. And before I get into it, I just wanted to note that this case has so much to it. This one can also warrant its own video in the future, and for length purposes I won't include a lot, only the main points and some information to clarify if necessary. So anyway, Natalee was a high school student who had recently graduated and was on a trip with 124 other students. On May 26th, they all arrived in Aruba to commence their celebration and partying, and party they did. They had 7 chaperones with them, and they would meet with the students every day to make sure everyone was okay and accounted for. Though it should also be noted that the chaperones were not expected to know everything at all times. As the partying commenced, Natalee was last seen on May 30th around 1:30 a.m. She was seen by her classmates exiting a bar called Carlos's and Charlie's with Jordan Vandersloot, a 17-year-old Dutch student, and Deepak and Satish Kalpo, natives and friends of Jordan Vandersloot. So she was supposed to be on a plane back home the next day, but she never showed up. Her passport and luggage was found in her room undisturbed, as if nobody was even there the next day. Local authorities searched throughout the island and shoreline but didn't find anything. Her mother and stepfather flew to Aruba as soon as they found out that she didn't show up. And when they did show up to Aruba, the first thing that they did was present the name of Jordan Vandersloot to the police. The name was given to them by the night manager at the hotel Natalee was staying at. And from there, the police and her family went to the home of Jordan. They questioned him, but he denied knowing anything about Natalee. So it was a constant back and forth of him denying that he ever even met her. But as we know, there was witnesses that saw them too. So eventually he admitted that Jordan and the 2 brothers were driving around with Natalee. Natalee had asked Jordan that she wanted to go to one of the local beaches. And so they eventually did go to one of the beaches. And from what Jordan and the brothers said is that she stayed there and wanted to stay, but Jordan and the brothers wanted to leave. So one story that was explained to the authorities was that Jordan and the brothers left and Natalee was there by herself. But then he later told another story of him and the brothers leaving with Natalee and dropping her off back at the hotel where she was staying at around 2 a.m. Now, Jordan claimed that another man approached Natalee when he was driving away. It was apparently a security guard from a neighboring building, though that was never really confirmed. That's what Jordan said, so keep that in mind. Who knows if that's true or not. So moving further into the investigation, hundreds of volunteers joined the search for her, but the thing is that there was really no physical evidence left. They thought they had found physical evidence from Natalee, or what they thought could have been from her, but later on during, the forensic investigation, it turned out that it wasn't her and it was just, a random strand of hair or something else that could have been interpreted as hers. And so from here on out, literally nothing was found that could have been some indication of where Natalee could be if she was still alive. But it just goes downhill from here in terms of the investigation, because this isn't the first time and it will not be the last time that the suspect Jordan will be interrogated, questioned by the police, arrested by the police. Same thing with the two brothers. It actually spans a couple years. There is a whole lot more to read on about this case, and I would encourage you to read into this one. It's a pretty lengthy one, and it just keeps on going back and forth, arrests here and there, questioning, interrogations, evidence leads that really lead to nothing. So ultimately, it's a lot of reading that I would encourage you to go look for yourself. Something I wanted to add before I moved on to the next entry into the list is that Jordan did indeed murder another girl. Her name was Stephanie Tatiana Flores Ramirez, and this was actually a couple years after the disappearance of Natalee. So whether or not he did murder Natalee, well, I think we would just have to look at this murder and probably, we can assume he definitely did something. Lauren Spierer. I hope I pronounced that right. Lauren Spierer was a 20-year-old student of Indiana University. She disappeared on June 3rd, 2011 in Bloomington, Indiana, from a sports bar called Kilroy's. The night she had disappeared, she was drinking with her friends. Her boyfriend, Jesse Wolf, did not want to come, but both were texting each other until Jesse had went to bed. Witnesses said that she was very intoxicated. Now, when she had disappeared, police had created a timeline using the CCTV footage from various cameras around the immediate area. So I roughly converted it into a timeline that I can just read off to you. So here it goes. Between the hours of 12:30 a.m. and 1:46 a.m., she was at the sports bar with friends, David Ron and Corey Rossman. From 2:27 to 2:51 a.m., Lauren left the bar with Corey, and they both stumbled their way to Corey's apartment. Corey's roommate, Michael Beth, took Corey to bed and tried to convince Lauren to stay for safety. Michael phoned neighbor Jay Rosenbaum, asking to take care of Lauren. From about 3:30 to 4:30 a.m., Lauren went to Jay's apartment. Jay had noticed bruises under Lauren's eye. When asked about it, Lauren didn't know where it came from. Lauren used Jay's phone, and she had used it to make 2 calls, one to David and another one to an unnamed friend, but neither of them answered. So then Lauren left the apartment at 4:30 a.m. and was the last time Lauren Spierer was seen. Police searched local landfill for body, but nothing was found. Some theories suggest that Lauren was drugged due to her extreme intoxication. Friends and boyfriend told police that she had used drugs on that night. Jay Rosenbaum told police that Lauren consumed alcohol, cocaine, and crushed pills known as Klonopin that evening. Another theory was possible abduction, her parents claiming that she could have been targeted because she was well known around the area and she had a ton of friends, so that might have been the case. Daniel Messel, convicted of killing another University of Indiana student, Hannah Wilson, in 2016 from the same bar, was thought to have been responsible, though there was never any evidence to link him to that, and he was never charged for it. And to this day, nothing concrete was ever found, so she essentially disappeared without a trace. Also, obviously her friends and boyfriend were questioned, but nothing was found, so again, we're going right back to no evidence. So that's going to be a very strong theme going throughout this iceberg. Michaela Garecht. Michaela Joy Garecht was a 9-year-old kid when she was kidnapped in Hayward, California on November 19th, 1988. Around 10 a.m. on Saturday, Michaela and her friend Katrina were riding scooters in Rainbow Market for snacks. They left the scooters at the door. They went into the store, got what they got, and continued to walk home, forgetting the scooters at the store. They realized they left the scooters and they went back for them. One of the scooters was missing. Michaela had noticed that. Michaela had seen one of the scooters parked by a parked car in the parking lot next to the Rainbow Market. Michaela had gone to grab it, and just when she was about to grab it, a man came out of one of the parked cars that the scooter was next to. The man picked up Michaela and threw her into her car. Michaela was screaming the entire time. Katrina watched the whole thing and she stood shocked. The kidnapper had successfully escaped with her. Katrina told the clerk at the store what had happened. The clerk then called the police. But in doing so, since the clerk didn't actually see what the suspect looked like, the clerk gave the incorrect description of the suspect. The clerk ended up telling the police that the man was someone in their 30s with a mustache driving a burgundy colored car. Police had used the wrong description of the suspect for 2 days. What he actually looked like, from what Katrina told the police, was he was hippie-like in appearance, somewhere in his 20s, with acne scars and shoulder-length dirty blonde hair. He also drove a sedan that was possibly cream or tannish in color. Since the police were using the wrong description for 2 days, this is cited as being a huge detriment to the investigation and possibly gave the suspect enough time to successfully escape. The search for Michaela was also the most extensive search that the Haywood Police Department has ever done. They had searched hillsides, parks, and unpopulated areas. Fingerprints were found on the scooter from an unknown source. It could have been from the abductor, it could have been from her. They couldn't tell what it was, so that was another dead end. And this is something interesting that I thought I'd share. On November 30th, the 49ers quarterback at the time, Joe Montana, made a public plea for her safe return. Her picture was also placed on milk cartons, and by December of that year, over 4,000 tips were made, which all of them were inconclusive into actually finding anything. So, dead ends. A reward of $70,000 was posted for any information. 42,000 missing person flyers were distributed by families and volunteers. So, as you can see, it was a pretty extensive search for Michaela. In December 1992, a false claim of a hidden body by an inmate in Indiana was made. Roger Haggard said he buried the body in Hunters Point, an area of San Francisco. Roger then said it was in Gladiolus Field in San Francisco. The police, upon searching, Roger said he had lied, and in doing so, 6.5 years was added to his original sentence. Tom Binder, a suspect in another kidnapping case, was considered a suspect. He kept injecting himself into previous investigations. So, the usual serial killer thing where they keep visiting the scene of the crime. Yeah, that's what he had kept doing. Though no evidence of him involved in any of the kidnapping was found. Philip Garrido, who had held a girl by the name of J.C. Lee Dugard for 18 years in captivity, was considered a suspect, but no evidence was found to link him. Lauren Herzog was considered a suspect. He was one half of the Speed Freak killers. Wesley Shermantine was the other person. Wesley had wrote a letter to Stockton Record after Lauren committed suicide. Wesley had stated that Lauren looked like the original sketch of the kidnapper, the hippie with long hair and acne. After thorough investigation, though, it was determined that Lauren was not connected in any way. Interesting to note, police excavated a well in Linden, California. They found remains of victims, but none were of Michaela. And the well in Linden, California, they were led to by Lauren Herzog, where they had previously buried other victims. On December 21st, 2020, police arrested David Misk. David Misk had previously been on trial for the murder of 2 women in 1986. He's been to prison, so whether or not he did actually kidnap Michaela, well, we'll never know. Morgan Nick. Morgan Chantel Nick was a 6-year-old girl from Ozark, Arkansas. She disappeared on June 9th, 1995 in Alma, Arkansas. Morgan and her mother, Colleen, went to a Little League baseball game in Alma. At 10:30 p.m., Morgan had asked her mother if she could catch fireflies with their friends. Her mother was unsure at first, but she let her go eventually. At around 10:45 p.m., Morgan was emptying sand from her shoes by her mother's car. Her friends were only a few feet away. They said they had seen a creepy man talking to her. Her friends had then come back to the game without her. Her mother then asked where Morgan was at. They said that Morgan was still at the car. When her mother went to look for her, she was not there, and from that point, she has not been seen since. In January 15th, 2002, a police dug on a private land in Boonville, Arkansas after they received a very specific tip. Police found nothing, though, and decided not to return. On November 15th, 2010, police searched a vacant house in Spierer, Oklahoma after a tip. They searched for DNA evidence that could show Morgan was there, but nothing was found. On December 18th, 2017, they returned to the same vacant house again after receiving another tip. Police then became interested in a well on the property after the dogs kept alerting to it. Though the search was called off on December 19th after nothing conclusive was found. Leads are still being received to this day and investigated, but so far nothing has been found. Asha Degree. Asha Degree was a 9-year-old girl from Shelby, North Carolina, who went missing on February 14th, 2000. Asha, from initial appearances, appeared to be a good kid. There was no trouble at home, there was no bad behavior, and she seemed happy to listen to her parents, so by all accounts she was a normal kid. On February 13th, Asha and her brother, O'Brien, went to church with some relatives. They returned home after that, and around 8 p.m. they went to bed. They had shared a room at the time. Around 12:30 a.m., their father, Harold, checked on them. They were both asleep. Harold then checked on them again at 2:30 a.m., and they were still both there. After that check, her brother, O'Brien, heard the bed squeak. He thought his sister was just switching positions. Asha assumedly got up and took a backpack, clothing, and personal items. Around 3:45 and 4:15 a.m., two drivers said they saw a small child who looked like her walking along Highway 18. One of the drivers turned around to approach her, but she ran away when she saw him. Her mother, Ikilia, woke up at around 5:45 a.m. to get them ready for school. She checked the room to see if Asha was there. She wasn't. Harold and Akeelia checked their house, car, and a relative's house across the street, but found nothing. Police were called, and at 6:40 a.m. they showed up. Searches began around this time. Friends, family, and neighbors began the search. By the end of the day, nothing was found except for a mitten that wasn't hers. News coverage prompted the two drivers from earlier to report to the police. On February 15th, candy wrappers were found in a shed at a business along the highway. A pencil, marker, and hair bow was also found. A week later, the search was called off after 9,000 man-hours. A 2 to 3 mile radius was searched. Asha possibly planned on running away, says the FBI after Akeelia told them what she took, but there was no reason for her to run away as well, or so was thought at the time. It is possible that she could have been abducted, but again, there is no significant evidence to support that claim. On August 3rd, 2001, Asha's backpack was found during construction of Highway 18 in Brooke County, approximately 26 miles north of Shelby. It was wrapped in a plastic bag. The worker who found it said Asha's number and name were on it. This was the last evidence for the case to be found. In 2004, an inmate gave a lead to police to dig at a specific intersection at Lawndale. Bones were found, but they were actually animals, so it was nothing, a dead end. In 2008 and beyond, Asha's parents established a scholarship in her name for students of the area, and they also started an annual walk to help raise awareness and funds for their search, which still continues to this day. Zebb Quinn. Zebb Wayne Quinn was an 18-year-old man from Asheville, North Carolina, who went missing on January 2nd, 2000. On Sunday evening, he worked in the electronics department in the Walmart in his town. At 9 p.m., he left work and had planned to go to Leicester, North Carolina. He was going there to buy a car, and he was going there with a friend, Robert Jason Owens. They had met in the Walmart parking lot, and then they set off. They drove in two different vehicles. They both stopped at a gas station at around 9:15 p.m. They were seen on the CCTV at the gas station, so this is a known fact. After they had left, Robert said Zebb flashed him to pull over. Zebb told him he received a page and needed to call the number. And a side note, I know a lot of you aren't even going to know what a pager is. I was a little too young to even be able to use one. I have seen them though, and they're just literally little text devices that get sent numbers for you to call later on a payphone or something. So yeah, little blast from the past there. Anyway, Robert had said Zebb was frantic after he had called the number. Zebb said he needed to cancel his plans and then drove off. Zebb hit Robert's car as he was driving off. Robert, later on in the night, went to a hospital for injuries from a second car accident in the same night. No reports were filed. That is just a very odd chain of events there. But anyway, moving on. Zebb's mom, Denise Vlahakis, filed a missing persons report the next afternoon. A man who said he was Zebb called Walmart saying he wasn't coming in. The call was traced back to a Volvo plant where Robert worked. Robert said he made the call to cover for Zebb, said it was something he would do as a friend and probably something Zebb would do for him. in similar circumstances. Police then talked to a woman named Misty Taylor. Misty Taylor was somebody Zebb was romantically involved with. He had gotten to know her weeks before he went missing. Zebb said he was threatened by Misty's boyfriend when he found out they were talking. Misty and her boyfriend, Wesley Smith, denied any involvement in the disappearance. Police found that number that was paged on January 1st was from his aunt, Ina Ustich. Zebb didn't really know her well, and Ina denied making the page. Ina had said she was having dinner at a friend's house, Tamara Taylor, who was Misty's mother. Misty and Wesley were also present with them. Ina had reported that her house was broken into that night, though nothing was stolen, but a few things were moved around. So whether this was Zebb or not, well, that's to be found out. On January 6th, Denise received a call from Zebb's former classmate. Denise and the classmate had worked at the same hospital. The classmate had said that they saw Zebb's car, a Mazda Protege, in a parking lot across the hospital at a restaurant. The car was examined by police, and this is what was weird about this car at this moment in time. The headlights were left on. There was a pair of lips and an exclamation mark drawn by lipstick on the back window, and there was a Labrador mixed puppy in the car that was still alive, by the way. A plastic hotel key was found, and it was unable to be traced to any local hotel in the area. A jacket and bottles were found, but the jacket was not Zebb's. Forensic evidence was conducted, but nothing was found. Denise believes that whoever did it knew that Denise, his sister, and his grandma worked nearby and could see the car easily. Witnesses claim to have seen the car being driven downtown, and a witness sketch bore a striking resemblance to Misty Taylor. On March 17th, 2015, Robert was arrested for the murder of a Food Network star contestant, Christy Schoen, her husband, and unborn child. Robert had accidentally ran them over. He was also charged with dismembering human remains, though I couldn't really see if he dismembered them with the car or he did it the, graphic way. But anyway, on June 2015, an investigation into Zebb's case unearthed fabric, leather materials, and other unknown hard fragments on Robert's property. Plastic bags were also found with pulverized powder in them. No comments were made regarding what the contents could be, though it was implied that it had something to do with Zebb. On July 10th, 2017, Roberts was formally charged with the first-degree murder and death of Zebb, though whether or not he actually did it, again, that is to be found, and there was actually no evidence that concluded that he did do it, though, it's implied, so maybe they actually caught the person responsible. Who knows? Joan Risch. Joan Risch was born Joan Carolyn Bard in Brooklyn, New York, 1930. She was 31 when she disappeared on October 24th, 1961 in Lincoln, Massachusetts. She was a graduate of Wilson College in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. She was an editorial assistant at Harcourt Brace and World, where she met and married her husband, Martin Risch. He was an executive at the company at the time when they married. They went on to have 2 kids, Lillian in 1958 and David in 1959. They eventually moved to Lincoln, Massachusetts, where she disappeared in the year of 1961. Joan then became a stay-at-home mom, or at least until her kids became old enough that she didn't have to watch them. Martin left his previous job and pursued a career at Fitchburg Paper Company. On the morning of October 24th, Martin left early in the morning to New York City for a business trip. Joan had woken up later in the morning to make breakfast for the kids. She took David to her neighbor's house across the street, Barbara Baker, so that she could watch him while she took Jillian with her in her blue 1951 Chevy to a dentist appointment, and then from there, they went to a shopping trip. She then returned home by 11:15 a.m. to pick up David. She made lunch for her kids and then took David to his room for a nap. Around 1 p.m., Barbara brought her son, Douglas, to play with Lillian. 2 p.m., Joan brought David and Lillian to Barbara's house. She said she would be back later. At 2:15 p.m., Barbara saw Joan wearing what could have been a trench coat. She wasn't entirely sure, though. She said that she saw her moving quickly up her driveway, carrying something red. Barbara thought it was just her chasing one of the kids. It was during this time it would be the last confirmed sighting of Joan. Virginia King was one of the neighbor's children. She said she saw an unfamiliar car parked near Joan's house. Another resident said that they had let that car pull out of Joan's driveway. Barbara then brought Lillian back home at around 3:40 p.m. She thought Joan was still home, so she didn't bother checking or anything like that. Lillian came back to Barbara's house at around 4:15 p.m. and said no one was home. Lillian said her mom wasn't home and that the kitchen was covered in some mysterious red paint. Barbara then came over to check at around 4:33 p.m. She could hear David was crying in his crib because he needed a diaper change. She then called the police. Police arrived and began investigating, talking to Barbara. In the house, they found what they thought was bloody smears on the walls, an overturned table, a wall-mounted phone ripped off and thrown into the garbage, and garbage left out on the kitchen floor. Joan was initially thought to have committed suicide, but no body was found. So then the entire department was on search for her. They called hospitals and asked if a woman matching her description was there, to be informed that she was not. Police then called her husband, Martin, to inform him of what happened. He immediately then came home on the next flight. Police found 4 letters in the Risch's mailbox that hadn't been brought into the house. A phone book was out on the dining room table, left open. Empty beer bottles were found in the garbage, and when questioned, Martin couldn't explain why they were there. He had said that the wine bottle was there from the 2 of them from the previous night, but the extra beer bottles were a mystery to him. While investigating the neighborhood, police were informed by multiple other residents that they had seen her. It ranged from a woman with the handkerchief tied around her head walking down Route 2A headed to Concord, to another woman with blood running down her leg walking along Route 128. Another sighting around 4:30 p.m. of a woman walking down Route 28 near Trapello Road was also told to police. Whether those sightings were actually of Joan, they were not investigated. The car that Virginia Keene had seen earlier was reported to have been there 5 days before, stated by the milkman, as well as other residents seeing a similar vehicle before the incident. A source for the blood at the scene could not be determined. Fingerprints were also present, but they couldn't be matched, especially since Joan wasn't there to have them compared. The blood suggested that the injury could have been from someone injuring themselves. The blood also led to the garage to the car specifically. There was blood on the rear fender, on the left side of the hood, and the center of the trunk. There was no solid indication of where the bleeding began in the house, as well as there being no bloody footprints outside of the house. As the search continued on following the days of her disappearance, volunteers and a reporter at a public library found books pertaining to murders and disappearances similar to what had happened to Joan, and while investigating, they had actually found out that Joan had checked out those books a few months ago before her disappearance. Possible suspects that could have seen her last included the milkman and the mailman, but these led nowhere since they had alibis. Every lead that the police had gotten from this point on led to nothing. One very plausible theory was that she voluntarily disappeared, the books that were checked out of the library being a possible giveaway to that, though that was more confusing as everybody who knew Joan, including Martin himself, said that she led a happy life at home. Either way, she was never found. Martin continued to live in the same house until 1975, though he eventually moved to another house in the area. He believed that his wife was still alive at the time until he passed away in the year of 2009. What could have happened to her? Who knows? Jimmy Hoffa. James Riddle Hoffa was an American labor union leader. He was born on February 14th, 1913 in Brazil, Indiana. Now, I'm debating on this one because this is another person that's been covered to death at this point. He's been featured and referenced in shows, cartoons, movies, music, you name it. Not so much anymore these days, but definitely when I was a kid, I remember hearing his name here and there. If you're familiar with the show of Mythbusters, he was actually featured as a myth in that. So I would probably watch that if I were you. It's really interesting. I may or may not do a standalone video on this guy himself because it gets pretty interesting. If not, I would recommend reading into this guy because, like I said, it's a very interesting one to read into. Shelly Miscavige. Michelle Diane Miscavige was a 61-year-old woman from Dallas, Texas. She was the wife of David Miscavige, leader of the Church of Scientology. She has apparently been involved in the church since the age of 12. She was a part of a group called Commodore's Messenger Organization. It was a group that had personally serviced L. Ron Hubbard on a personal ship called the MV Apollo in the 1970s. There, she met and married David Miscavige in 1982. She then became her husband's personal assistant. Later on, she eventually became involved with Tom Cruise at the time. This involvement included finding possible wives for Tom Cruise, though these allegations were denied by everyone in the church. The time that preceded her disappearance was nothing notable, and what I mean by that is publicly known records of it. There isn't anything notable. So if there is something going on behind the curtains, well, we don't know. Her husband left the international base of Scientology in 2006. This somehow had an effect on Shelly. Her mood was said to have changed and was said to have looked cowed at the time. Shelly asked Mike Rinder, then Scientology's chief spokesman, if her husband was still wearing his wedding ring. This somehow could have been a catalyst to her public disappearance. And when I say public disappearance, I mean that she hasn't been seen in public since 2007. The Church of Scientology's current stance on the subject matter is that she is not missing, she is just not appearing in public. Missing persons reports were filed with the LAPD. In August of 2013, one was filed by actress Leah Remini, though a detective, Gus Villanueva, said that the report was unfounded and that Shelly was not missing. LAPD supposedly located and spoke with Shelly, which confirmed that she was not missing. Leah Remini continued to question Shelly's whereabouts, though. It was noted that during Tom Cruise's and Kitty Holmes' wedding, Leah questioned why Shelly wasn't there. A few years after that, in December 2018, Leah continued to question Shelly's disappearance, now using a show called Leah Remini, Scientology and the Aftermath. The church responded to the show, essentially saying that she was a foaming anti-Scientologist, abusive, and creating unnecessary drama by filing missing persons reports. The church had also commented on Shelly's absence in public. In July 2012, two lawyers that represented Miscavige had told two UK reporters that she was not missing and devotes her time to the church. In 2018, another lawyer had told the Daily Beast that Shelly lives a private life, and the legal team had personally met with her. An interesting note is that Shelly's mother, Mary, was also a Scientologist. Mary had resigned from the church and took some confidential documents with her. She later joined another independent Scientologist group, the Advanced Ability Center. On September 8th, 1985, she was found dead at the age of 52. She was shot in the head along with 3 other shots to the chest. Slash marks were found on her wrist. This was somehow ruled a suicide. David Miscavige, speaking to a now former member of the church, commented on the death of Mary, saying, and I quote, "That bitch got what she deserved." So there's definitely more to this story, but unfortunately we just don't know what else happened. Tara Grinstead. Tara Faye Grinstead was a 30-year-old American high school teacher. She disappeared on October 22, 2005 in Ocilla, Georgia. She began teaching in 1998 at Irwin County High School in Ocilla. On October 22, 2005, she had visited a beauty pageant and a barbecue. The next day, she did not show up for work. Her coworkers, being worried about her sudden disappearance, called the police. They showed up at her house and saw that her car was still there. They made their way into her home and saw that her phone was still there, but purse and keys were gone. Georgia Bureau of Investigation was called. The police felt that they were under-equipped for this. The GBI also found no signs of forced entry and that of a struggle. Initial investigations found no evidence, so at this point there was just nothing that could help them in the investigation. That is until 2008, the case was renewed by a CBS show called 48 Hour Mystery. Police found a latex glove in Tara's front yard with DNA samples on it. When the DNA was analyzed, it turned out to be a man's DNA, though no matches were found for the DNA. In February of 2009, a video from a self-proclaimed serial killer surfaced. The killer called himself the Catch Me Killer. He had said he had 16 female victims. Authorities, having literally nothing to go off of, then just assumed that Tara could be one of them. Police then investigated this claim and found out that the supposed killer was Andrew Haley, though it also turned out that the videos and everything from Andrew was found to be a hoax. So this was another dead end. On February 23rd, 2017, the GBI received a tip and arrested Ryan Alexander Duke. 3 years before the disappearance, Ryan attended the same school. According to the warrants read in court, Ryan broke into Tara's house and had strangled her and removed the body. Another arrest on March 3rd, 2017, a former classmate of Ryan, Bo Dukes. The two are not related, by the way. Bo was charged with attempting to conceal a death, hindering apprehension, and tampering with evidence. On August 2017, new charges were added, 2 counts of making false statements, 1 count of hindering apprehension of criminal activity, and 1 count of concealing a death. The trial of Bo Dukes began on March 19, 2019. He was found guilty for helping cover up the murder. He was sentenced to 25 years on March 22, 2019. Ryan Duke's trial began on May 20, 2022. So very recently, actually, this month, depending on when you're watching this video. He was found guilty of concealing a death, though he blamed Bo for the murder. Tara's body was never found. is what I would say, but in actuality, Ryan or Bo Dukes supposedly burned her body in one of the nearby woods in Osceola, though it isn't exactly determined who did it though, because they essentially just keep passing the blame off onto each other. And the trial is actually still going on to this day, I believe, so there still might be new developments in this case. So I would look out for that because this definitely isn't over yet. Amelia Earhart. Now, I'm extremely positive that everyone has heard of her in some shape or form. She's been referenced numerous times in all types of media and has been covered extensively as well. She's been like Jimmy Hoffa in cartoons, TV shows, movies, I mean, you name it. For those reasons, I won't go every single thing because honestly, that would just take a long time to really get, a solid understanding on just her life because again, it's very long. I'll just probably throw out some points so I won't leave you high and dry here. She was born on July 24th, 1897. She was the first woman to travel across the Atlantic biplane. She had attempted to fly around the world with another crew member, Fred Noonan. At 22,000 miles completed, she was only 7,000 miles short of completing the journey. There was a Coast Guard ship that was going to guide her to an island for refueling, but they never saw Amelia. Now, theories range from crashing and sinking into the ocean, landing on another island because they couldn't find the refueling island called Gardiner Island, and being captured by the Japanese. There's also tons of other theories as well, which would just be way too much to get into this. And like I said before, for the other ones, this can be its own long form video, which may be the case because I really want to talk about the theories. D.B. Cooper. Again, this is another one of those well-known cases that has been referenced in a lot of other media. It's been talked about and documented by a lot of other people as well. But I can guarantee you that I definitely do want to make a video about this guy on its own. So for that reason, I don't want to give out too much information about him, but just like I did for the last one. But I'll throw out a little information to you guys. So first off, he was never identified. Many have come forward and claimed to be him, but they were never proven to be him. Some of the money from the plane heist was found by an 8-year-old boy in Washington, and it was confirmed to be a portion of the money by the FBI. He inspired at least 15 other copycats in 1972, though most of those attempts weren't as successful or weren't successful at all. Aviation security, at least for the domestic US, was beefed up because of Cooper, and in doing so, hijackings became less frequent. And lastly, there is a possibility that he may be alive today, which could be very plausible. If he is, we don't know. And if he isn't, well, we don't know. So if you've made it this far, I just want to say thank you for watching. This took a long time to do because, like I've said before, I'm not doing this full time and I have other things to do in the meantime. So there's going to be more parts to the video coming out. There's a bunch more tiers to go through. So if you're going to stick around, just be expecting that. Maybe soon, maybe not, but I can guarantee you that it will come out. And again, thank you for watching part 1.